This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
This morning on the show, I am joined by drama teacher and doctoral researcher Luke, who is going to talk with us about whether or not we truly value the arts as they exist currently within schools.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
A very good morning to you. This is your Saturday breakfast show here on Teachers Talk Radio with me, your host, Darren Lester. Today is Saturday, the 5th of July, 2025. How have you all been? How has your week been? I know a lot of my colleagues, particularly those who are working in independent schools, are finally finished for the summer, which is a great relief to them. I know that a lot of you are still powering through about 10 more days, I would imagine, if you are teaching in the state sector here in England. So we are on that downward slope towards the summer holiday. I personally am feeling a bit odd about it all. This is, as friends of the show will know, the end of my first year. Well, I say end. We'll talk about why I'm feeling a bit weird about the whole end of school ready for summer thing in a minute. This is the end of my first year working at an online school, which I have enjoyed immensely, don't get me wrong. But we work year round, which is very, very bizarre. As somebody who, went through the school system in England and so was used to having the summers off, then taught in the school system, so was used to having the summers off of work. I don't have that kind of big end of year celebration, which is, I don't know how I feel about it, actually. I thought I was going to say that it was sad, but actually, I kind of feel like, I don't know, I kind of feel like because I don't have that stopping point, I can keep going. I think, I talked about this a lot with colleagues back when I was in brick and mortar schools. When you knew that you were winding down towards a holiday, you felt like you had that stopping point. You felt like you were winding down. You felt like you were ready for it. Whereas, because now I kind of don't have that stopping point, my holidays come as and when I choose them, kind of like in a normal job. Because I don't have that stopping point, it's really easy, I think, just to keep going. Of course, I do, as I talked about with somebody last week, I do also think that a lot of the perks of my job are making it easier. So because most of my lessons are one-to-one, I can focus on teaching. I don't have to worry about behaviour management or any of that good stuff. Because my school has different people in charge of different things, again, I can focus on the teaching. I can focus on my role as head of department and, safeguarding and exam entries and all of that other stuff that as head of department I would be dealing with in a brick and mortar school. They're done by somebody else. And so because all of those kind of secondary stresses are removed, and I can keep focused on the thing about teaching that I really like, which is the teaching, I kind of don't feel the need for a long summer break. I actually feel okay about it. I don't mind that I'm not getting my summer. That's not a problem for me, and that is not something I ever thought that I would say. So I will just say that while I personally don't mind not getting my summer holiday, all of you who are still working in brick and mortar schools, all of you who are getting ready for the summer, either because it's your speech day today and you are ready to finish, or because you've got 2 weeks to go and you are just powering through to that finish line, you 100% deserve it. And that's something that I never ever want to forget. That's a feeling that I never want to forget, because I think when you are removed from a brick and mortar classroom, you do forget how intense it is. You do forget what piles on top of teachers. And kind of as I become enmeshed, I suppose, in online teaching, I do want to keep doing the odd bit of supply in a brick and mortar school. I do want to kind of remember that feeling, because a lot of the criticism that we get as teachers, as we know, comes from people who haven't taught. And it comes from people who either don't know or have forgotten what it's like to be at the chalk face, to be in that environment. And I never want to be one of those teachers. So good luck to you all. If by the time I see you for breakfast next Saturday, you are done and you had a week off already, then congratulations. If we are then a week closer to your holiday, just keep your eyes on the prize, be ready for that finish line, because Lord knows you deserve it.
Over 7,500 primary schools are already using Compel Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to compelprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
According to Schools Week, Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson has backtracked on a key element of her flagship pledge to recruit 6,500 new teachers by confirming that they won't all be new. The target admits any mention of recruiting teachers in so-called key subjects and confirms that primary teachers will be left out too. Last spring, Labour made recruiting 6,500 new teachers in key subject areas one of its 6 first steps for change. In November, Phillipson pledged they would all be new teachers. However, the government has now confirmed the target will look at how much the workforce has grown overall rather than at just new recruits. It will also only apply to secondary and college teachers. Jack Worth of the National Foundation for Educational Research said framing the target to include retention rates was the right approach. However, some teacher training providers said it fundamentally shifts the goalposts. A Department for Education spokesperson said that supporting teachers to stay in the profession and thrive is essential to achieving the 6,500 teachers pledge in a sustainable way. The original 2024 manifesto wording promised the 6,500 would be expert teachers in key subjects. But the word expert was dropped in December 2024's Plan for Change and replaced with extra teachers focusing on subjects with shortages. Now the 6,500 target includes all secondary subjects. Further detail and union comment is on the Schools Week website. In Scotland, a pupil who won a legal battle for an interpreter in class says a new bill will help young deaf people navigate life in a hearing world, as it will legally recognise students and teachers who use British Sign Language. The female pupil who took legal action against Fife Council after being denied access to an interpreter had a tribunal find in her favour, after she said she was tired of having to try and focus on lip reading whilst also trying to write stuff down. According to STV News, MSPs voted to pass reforms. The Education Scotland Bill will also see the creation of a new authority, Qualification Scotland, abolishing the current SQA model, and establish a new Chief Inspector of Education of Scotland. Further details can be found on STV News online. The Guardian features comments by Ofsted's Chief Sir Martin Oliver about the impact government scrapping of headline school grades could have on house prices. Speaking at an education conference, Sir Martin is reported as saying parents and schools had become familiar with headline grades after 30 years of use, and said he knew of house prices shooting up by £15,000 after nearby schools were graded as outstanding. From November, schools will be given report cards with up to 11 different grades. After making a joke about Rightmove and other property websites who make reference to school gradings on property listings, he said he had a serious point about the impact inspection grades have. He also went on to apologise for the rushed nature of changes to inspection, after criticism around delays in communicating what the new inspection framework would look like. Finally, in South Yorkshire, healthcare professionals have joined the debate on school uniform, this time talking about footwear. A lead orthotist at Sheffield Children's Hospital argues that schools need to change outdated uniform policies when it comes to forcing pupils to wear formal school shoes. The BBC reports that allowing pupils to wear trainers at school would, according to the orthotist, guard against potential discomfort, foot pain and even knee problems in later life. An orthotist specialises in the fitting of orthoses, braces or splints, and bespoke footwear to help people with movement difficulties. A specialist from Sheffield says that wearing inappropriate school shoes makes issues worse. The specialist goes on to say that it is incredibly challenging to fit insoles and splints into standard old-fashioned shoes, and states that unlike hard shoes, trainers allow for natural foot movement, promoting longer-term foot health. The report can be found on the BBC News website, and it also features comment and reaction from schools in the area and pupils themselves. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Thank you, Joe. Really, really interesting, as always. You know, every week I come on the show and I tend to talk to you about research, and I always feel a bit weird defining my terms. But I think it goes to show exactly why it is so important to define our terms when we think about what it means to have those new teachers in inverted commas, because we are being told one thing. We're being told that there are 6,000 new teachers, and then we are being told that actually they're not all new, and some of them are not being counted because they are primary, and for some reason our primary colleagues don't count. Don't even get me started on that. And when you are not told from the beginning what you mean by something, or what somebody means by something, you bring your own interpretation to it. And so when your interpretation doesn't match their interpretation, you feel lied to. And so now I feel a bit less silly about defining my terms, because I kind of understand what it feels like to be misled through a manipulation of the terms. So when I'm writing my thesis, and I'm explaining what I mean by words that should be self-evident. I will hopefully feel a bit more confident doing so because I understand now, sort of after Joe talked in the news there today, what it actually means to really not understand what somebody means by something. That's also going to be really important for us today because we are talking about the arts and we're talking about whether we truly value them in schools. I am joined by doctoral researcher and teacher Luke Attridge this morning. Luke, are you there?
I am there. Good morning.
Fantastic. Good morning. So, it has been a very long time since I've had a guest on the show, and even longer since I've had a live guest on the show. So, I was a little bit nervous about making sure that I pushed all the right buttons this morning. But the fact that you are here with me is amazing. Um, our topic is do we fully value the arts, which we will get down to shortly. But, Luke, before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, so drama teacher in a school in North Hampshire, and I've been teaching for about 13 years. And I've been very fortunate to work in the same school for that amount of time because it is a very lovely school, and the arts, I would say, are really kind of supported and celebrated there. So I felt quite content to stay. And I'm also doing research as well into drama teachers' views and conceptions on knowledge and how it influences their curriculum design.
Amazing. Amazing. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. I love that you have stayed in the same school for 13 years because I don't know if it was the same for you, but when I went through my teacher training, we were told, 3 to 5 years and then you move on. Um,
Mm,
and
yes.
I stayed in my first school for 5 years. And I did at that point feel the need to move on. But I was at my previous school for 12. And I think had I not had the opportunity to become a head of department elsewhere, I probably would have stayed there for quite easy the rest of my career.
Yeah, I think I've been really fortunate actually. When I I also trained there as well. It was one of my placement schools. It just so happened at the right time there was a job coming up, so I applied. I was fortunate enough to get the job, and then within 5 to 6 years, the opportunity to become the head of department was there as well. So I applied for that job, and I was lucky enough to get that, and I've kind of stayed there ever since. And it is a very nice environment to work in, so it's easy to stay there.
Yeah, and I think it's really important as well because, all schools have a culture, they are all very different,
Mm,
and it does take a lot of time for you as a practitioner to get used to a new place and for a school to get used to you. And so
mhm.
actually, I think, if a teacher can become embedded in the school fabric, if a teacher is happy where they are and getting the career that they want out of it, I see nothing wrong with staying there long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And the kind of the joy is you do get to kind of go through different stages of that school and its development and see changes and be kind of part of that kind of improvement process, which I
Yeah.
think is really nice. And there's a lot of value to that in terms of your own career.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, yeah, sometimes we get caught up, don't we, in the kind of business model that is often thrust on schools about what it means to move up the ladder, and
Yeah.
what it means to have career satisfaction. And I think that's where the whole 5 year thing comes from. But if you're happy, just do what makes you happy.
Of course, yeah. And I think in part for me, what's made me kind of feel quite happy, like confident in that role is just how much the arts are supported and how they
Mm,
are valued within that school system. We're a state school. We are subject to, you know, Progress 8 and EBAC and all of that
yeah,
kind of, the accountability measures that go into schools. But even still, there is a kind of a safe space for the arts there where it is celebrated and children do get to enjoy really good, strong access to it.
amazing. That's what you want. I thought we'll pick up on that in a second. But first,
Yeah.
let's be good researchers and
Mm.
define our terms.
What
So
terms would you like me to define?
let's define arts to start with. When we talk about the arts, what are
Mm.
we talking about?
I like to go for a broad definition of the arts, including any artistic subject,
Okay.
whether it's kind of the classical, kind of painting, and all the different mediums that go within that particular subject, music, dance, and of course, drama and theatre, as well as things like photography. And I'd even consider and take in media, film studies, and of course, literature as well.
Mhm.
So it's a broad church.
Absolutely. And that is what to me makes the arts really, really exciting.
Mm,
is the fact that it does encompass so many things. With my classicist head on, when I
mm,
think about the arts, I always look back to the Roman muses.
mm.
There were nine of them, and they covered epic poetry, history, hymn, flute playing specifically,
Oh,
poetry and dance as one person, lyric poetry, tragedy, comedy, and space
oh, wow.
as
This
the
guy, this is an even broader church there.
Absolutely, absolutely. But what is interesting to me there is obviously, you mentioned things like media and the arts that have moved along with the time, photography and that sort of thing.
Mm,
And so we've kind of encompassed those as times have moved on. But also, you brought literature in under that umbrella, and
yeah.
other things that have quite often traditionally in schools been classified as their own kind of separate little domain. So
Yeah, and I just think kind of, if I look at the kind of how I've defined the arts there in terms of those subjects, there what's kind of fundamental that runs underneath them all is this idea of creation of something to communicate.
I love that. I
And
love
so
that.
that's why I bring literature into it, because telling a story is, writing about a story and learning kind of the formal process or way of writing or the rules of writing a story. I don't come from a literary background, as you could probably tell, but correct me if I'm wrong. But the idea of it, it's quite a personal thing.
Yeah,
It's your own personal engagement that you create something to communicate to others.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think whether we conceptualize that explicitly or not, I think that is how the arts are understood in schools. I look at the number of times that schools I've seen being short on English teachers, and so they've
Mm,
brought drama teachers in.
yeah.
With the understanding that because you know how to analyze plays, because you've had that training, then you can deliver parts of the English curriculum. At Key Stage 2, drama is brought in under the English thread of the curriculum with the
Mm,
speaking and listening, the oracy. And so, there has always kind of been that interplay, that interweaving in our curriculum, which I've sometimes worried undermines the subject because it sort of says, you've got this one set of skills, therefore you can do this other set of skills as well. But now that you've kind of brought them all together, I wonder if it strengthens it by showing what those links are.
Yeah, I think there's an element of it. I don't get me wrong. I'm not saying as like a trained drama teacher, I'd be able to teach English better than someone who's a trained English teacher or a
Hmm.
trained literature teacher. But there's a lot of kind of interdisciplinary, if you want to call it that, crossover between the two. And in terms of the form of
Hmm.
writing and how you structure literature or a novel or storytelling, there is a lot of crossover there.
Yes.
Absolutely, with drama, but the kind of, I guess, the pedagogies, the way in which you teach would be slightly different. You come from a very different background, so you're teaching in a different way. But there is, you're right. I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Saying
Hmm.
that actually the idea that there's, does it weaken the kind of the salience of a subject because there's some crossover there, or one subject is subsumed within another. You were talking about like Key Stage 2 curriculum, that drama was in the English curriculum. It's the same for Key Stage 3 as well. It's not a subject within its own right within the national curriculum, but you can find strands of it in the English national curriculum. And I think that, yes, that gives it some relevance. It's there in some small form, kind of potted away within English, but there is some crossover there.
Absolutely. And I suppose particularly kind of given the state of schools at the moment with funding cuts and everything, it's better that it's somewhere than nowhere.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
All right, so we've defined our terms. We we have proven to our university. In case I didn't mention, because I don't think I did at the beginning, I first I was going to say encountered, but that makes it sound a bit creepy. But I also can't say met. I first came across Luke a couple of weeks ago when he was delivering a talk at a seminar at Reading University, where we are both undertaking our doctoral degrees at the moment.
Mm.
Um, and so, actually, I know what my reasons for doing my doctorate are, but what are yours?
Yeah, well, you were very kind in your feedback about my conference talk,
It
so
was
thank you
very
for
good.
that. Thank you very much. Um, so yeah, my reasons for getting into doing a doctorate are kind of, so it just come back from personal experience and kind
Hmm.
of uh 2018, 2019, Ofsted are releasing their documentation about their new kind of deep dive accountability measures in secondary schools, and
Okay.
they're talking around curriculum and the importance of curriculum within subjects for secondary schools. And so a lot of information was being released around that. I just finished, it's kind of in the process of finishing my MA, and which was on curriculum design and drama teachers as well. So I was kind of reading lots about what was coming out of Ofsted,
Hmm.
feeding information to my kind of senior leadership team, being like, "Oh, did you know this is on the horizon? This is all, in the pipeline. It's coming through. These will be changes. We'll be subjected for this." Um, and it was really interesting, and I was just like, "Well, this sounds good." Giving lots of kind of spotlight to the curriculum, shall we say, within secondary schools, and a lot of the research that I've been reading for my MA was talking about like the role of knowledge within the curriculum. And of course it comes round to kind of the forward planning for the next academic year, where the middle leaders are taken away on a kind of a conference day, conference evening. We go and workshop and kind of think about what are the kind of the agenda setting for the next academic year in the school, and it comes on to curriculum. And I was like, "Oh, this is brilliant. This is really good. We've got lots to talk about here. There's loads going on, and I'd be really interested to see what the agenda setting is." And the kind of my reaction to that was to go, "Oh, this is interesting, but I feel like there's a real depth here." And actually, a lot of what was discussed was more surface level,
Yeah.
and drama wasn't really mentioned, and a lot of the handouts were subject specific. And I was sat there at the table, kind of dutifully waiting, kind of looking at people handing out papers, going, "Oh, this is for history. Here's some information for geography. This is English. Here's maths. This is the science. Here are the three different sciences and different views about teaching chemistry, physics, and biology." And then I was kind of sat there, and I wasn't given any resources because nothing had been given about drama. And not that saying I was, hurt, and therefore but I was hurt. I was left to my own devices, and it just felt a bit like, "Oh, well, why isn't drama in on this
Yeah.
conversation?"
Yeah.
So
That's so wrong.
yeah, and I was left there being like, "Well, if I'm a drama teacher, and at that point I've been teaching drama for about 8 years. If I'm a drama teacher, and there's going to be a big focus on curriculum design, having a real clear kind of like intention, implementation, and then impact, like in that kind of Ofsted thread that was the kind of the language that was being touted around at
Hmm.
the time. And I don't have any guidance. Well, I'm kind of on my own here.
Yes.
And there is, in the drama community, the drama education kind of community and drama educational academics, there's lots written about that, but nothing specifically about drama curriculum
Okay.
and like guidance for there's stuff about progression and the importance of subject knowledge and the plethora of like practices and practitioners and styles of drama and theatre that are out there, but nothing necessarily to be like, well, if you're planning a curriculum in drama, you can plan it this way. You could plan it this way. You could think about it in this sense.
Hmm.
And there are threads of it. You can pick up on it, but nothing that's explicit. And actually, that's what other subjects kind of have access to a certain extent. There is explicit examples of this is a knowledge structure within English. This is
Yeah.
how think about Ruth Ashby's book, Subject and Subject Knowledge. Got a copy of it somewhere around me at the moment.
Hmm.
And kind of there's a section on there on music education and knowledge structures within that, but still nothing within drama. So it was that moment where I was like, somebody should look into this, and that someone could be me.
I love
So
it.
that's kind of where it started for me personally.
That's amazing. It's great that that kind of gap in the knowledge sort of fell into your lap.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm very fortunate.
I kind of love the irony as well that you were feeding all of this stuff back to your senior managers, and yet yours was the subject being left out of the conversation.
Yeah, and I don't think that's their fault. I
No.
don't think it's anyone's fault. I think it's just potentially the nature of the kind of the education system at the time, and kind of some of the policies and practices that come from government and the Department for Education at that time, just really being marginalised, the arts being marginalised. drama specifically, just because it's not in the national curriculum as its own discrete subject.
Mm. It's interesting, isn't it, that drama has that status or lack thereof. You mentioned that in the Ashby book there is that section on music. Fine arts will quite often be given their own. The number of pedagogical books I've seen on teaching art is innumerable, probably more than any of the other arts subjects. So I do find it fascinating that drama gets sidelined almost. And even then, that's comparative to the other arts, which are sidelined compared to STEM and the core subjects and humanities and all of that. So kind of you're drawing the short straw almost in all cases.
Yeah, and if you look back through the history of the kind of the ebb and flow of the development of drama education in this country, in England, it's kind of that is the story, and it is very much about the what's in flavour in government at that time and
Yeah.
how that impacts the subject and how the subject responds to it. So if we go back to thinking, Harriet Finley Johnson is kind of like one of the often credited as one of the earliest like teachers writing about their experiences of teaching drama
Okay.
in the time, and she wrote a book called Dramatic Methods of Teaching, and she laid out her experiences. So it's mostly just her own experiences, very anecdotal to her, about how she was teaching in a school, and she was teaching dramatic activities, is kind of how it's phrased. And she didn't really propose a theory of drama education. She wasn't saying this is how drama should be. It's just saying these are my experiences in schools, and here are some of the things I've done with, teaching dramatic literature in education, and kind of her reflections on the power and the kind of importance of it. But it's interesting at the same time. So in kind of Parliament that was being discussed in 1911. Edward Holmes, who was a former chief inspector, she kind of is credited with this kind of idea of like a kind of more progressive education, what you might deem as progressive education in kind
Okay.
of nowadays terms, more experimental, more kind of less kind of traditional
Mm.
teaching methods, to use that kind of term. But this guy, Edward Holmes, a former chief inspector in 1911, he essentially condemned like drill methods as he saw them at the time in schools. And he's seen as like being credited as the person who kind of put forward maybe this kind of early form of progressive education movement, being like the first voice there. So we've got kind of like a government figure, a former chief inspector, kind of saying, actually, let's push for progressive methods in, the English system. And then you have Harriet Finley Johnson writing her Dramatic Methods of Teaching, getting published, where you can see the early threads of progressive drama education. Like, so there is this real like context about kind of what's going on in government and how we respond to it. And
Yeah.
at the time that I was having this experience of going, well, drama's got nothing. There's nothing out there that's being written about that says, here's thinking about drama curriculum. This is what it looks like. This is how it could be conceived. And it is there. It's very niche. It's very hard to find. Whereas in other subjects, it's a bit more prevalent.
Yes.
So we're kind of responding to it now and kicking back and, sounding off about this kind of the importance of drama and how it should be its own discrete subject and access to it for students.
Yeah, good. And now is the perfect time to do it, isn't it? With all the threats that we have, like we've mentioned, to the arts in general, and then it's a shame that you have to shine a spotlight, forgive the horrible pun, on drama, but you do, because it there is the danger that it will just be subsumed into English all the way throughout the school, and you then end up with GCSE and A level drama, in inverted commas, being ticked off as part of the GCSE and A level English curricula.
Yeah, and and it's the most extreme end of it just being wiped out from schools, which I
Yeah.
don't really realistically believe that will happen. We've
No.
always been there for at least Harriet Finley Johnson's time,
Yes.
at least over 100 years in state secondary schools. But we are in a situation where schools don't have to teach it. I believe
No.
free schools and maths don't necessarily have to follow the national curriculum.
No.
Therefore, there is potential for some schools just not to teach drama, which is a shame considering its value. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of, going back to the idea of like, do we value the arts? There is that real question of, actually, some schools really do,
Yeah.
some schools don't.
Yes.
And that is a concern, considering how much, if you kind of tap into drama educationalists and the associate bodies who do fantastic work out there in terms of promoting the value of the arts, there are so many. There's lots of values of the arts there.
Yeah. So why do you think we have these schools that do ignore those values? Why do you think that, again, the arts in general and drama specifically are the things that are often first to be cut, or, shunted to the back of the timetable, or, oh, it's sports day, so we'll take them out of drama to do their practice or whatever it might be?
It's a really complicated, really
Okay.
complex kind of question, and there's lots of facets to it. And I appreciate that's kind of like a, well, you could say that about any situation, but it is the truth of it. There's
Yeah.
no kind of one thing that contributes. I think if you were to kind of organize it into reasons that I might go, actually, this is really important. One is the kind of the progress 8 measures, how certain subjects don't they do count, but they don't count as much as other subjects. So this kind of classification of some subjects are worth more than others, that's a real problem. And
Yes.
it's not just a problem for drama, it's a problem for music, it's a problem for dance, it's a problem for art, it's a
Mm.
problem for geography, for history. And I think it is even a problem for those subjects who are at the top of that pile, like English and maths, because you're kind of they are important. I'm
Yeah.
not saying they're not, but are you forcing students to engage with them?
Yes.
Whereas actually some students they might not see the relevance in it, which is an awful thing to say. And it is really important for them to have an understanding of maths and science and English. That is key. But equally valuable is, the arts and
Yes.
geography and history and the languages. They're all really valuable. And I think that kind of baking that into the system, this hierarchy of subjects, is really detrimental.
Yeah.
It's really detrimental.
Yeah. So I wonder whether we would be better off, kind of you in the arts and us in the humanities, if we did move more towards a true EBAC style, similar to, the International Baccalaureate,
Mm.
where a range of subjects had to be studied up to the equivalent of GCSE or the equivalent of A level. Um,
Oh, do you know what? I think I might disagree there. I
oh,
think
go on.
student choice is really kind of. I think it's a key part of drama education.
Okay.
And the longer I've been teaching drama, the more I'm really coming around to this view. And I know there are lots of drama teachers out there who absolutely teach in this style and they drive that. And I've come round to that thinking. So I've been my own practice and my own kind of teaching. I've been quite a journey with it in terms of my understanding and exploring different ways of kind of teaching drama.
Mm.
Is that student choice is really key. Student agency is really important to the
Mhm.
subject, and but I think that's really important to education
Yeah.
in saying that actually, student agency, what they choose and what they want to follow, and developing their passions, what other than subject, that's really key. And I think some of that is taken away if you say everyone must study these subjects up to GCSE.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. And I suppose it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because,
Mm.
while we do want bums on seats, it is also a case of what we have in the optional subjects, if you like, is the benefit that the kids choose our subjects. Whereas,
Yeah.
poor English teachers, maths teachers, science teachers, they have everybody whether they want to be there or not.
Mm. Yeah, and that is it's a luxury that we have, and I think
Yes.
it's a luxury that all subjects should have. And
Yeah.
there are, a lot of arguments saying, well, they're children, they are teenagers, and actually their decision making in the moment when they're picking
Yes.
options, if they could opt for anything, then that might not serve their best interests. And we as adults have to put some things in place you might not feel this way now, but actually it might be really important for you in the future. There still needs to be some options, some more choice there. So I wouldn't necessarily say that everyone must study it up to GCSE, everyone must take it for A level.
That's absolutely fair. That's absolutely fair. It's an interesting one, isn't it? It comes down to what you were talking about before about curriculum design and kind of
Mm.
how we design our not only our curricula within our subjects, but how a school designs its own curriculum.
Yeah.
and what it offers and what it looks like. I keep thinking about, you've brought up dance a couple of times,
Mm,
and I did a BTEC in performing arts back in the day, and we could do an optional dance module. We got to choose
mm,
between dance and set design, and I just double checked because I knew that A level dance had been a discrete option of its own back in the day, and it does still
mm.
exist.
Yeah.
AQA still offers it, while it's also on the PE curriculum because you can do dance as a PE option.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting that dance almost has this privileged status in the arts that I hadn't thought of until just now, where it's available in all sorts of different combinations of subjects and
Mm.
available as its own discrete thing as well as embedded in other subjects. And I wonder whether that kind of cross-curricular embedding is almost the way to go, not to replace the arts, not by any stretch of the imagination, but to really emphasize where they fit in with the humanities and the sciences, to really kind of again to spotlight their importance and to spotlight their utility.
Yeah, I think you can, but I think what you've just got to bear in mind there is so take drama as an example, or actually just use dance as an example. The the quality, not the quality, the difference in teaching, I think, is what it comes down to. An English teacher teaching a drama lesson will be different to a drama teacher teaching a drama lesson. And conversely, like a dance, someone who's trained in dance and has a dance background teaching a PE lesson is going to be different than having a PE teacher teach a dance lesson. Does that make sense in terms of there is a real another aspect of this and kind of valuing the arts is having people who are trained in that subject take those lessons.
Yes, yeah. So we see that quite a lot. I suppose across the curriculum, really. I've seen science teachers delivering maths lessons.
Mm,
I've delivered language lessons in languages that I'm less confident in than others.
mm,
Um, and that tends to come down to budget cuts, doesn't it?
mm.
Realistically,
Yeah, and
um,
funding.
yeah, the fact that you may not be able to afford a dance specialist, but you have a PE teacher who did a dance module at university,
Mm,
and so has theoretically enough subject knowledge to teach it, even though maybe he hasn't danced for 15 years.
mm. Yeah, and I'm not saying that it can't happen. Like you can't have teachers who don't have a background in that particular
Yeah.
subject who can't then go on to be fantastic teachers in that subject. It just takes time, and but there will be differences. I remember anecdotally a colleague of mine who I was planning cover for. They were an English teacher covering a drama lesson,
Mm.
and they kind of dished them out the cover work, and then they kind of took it. I went my separate way, and they came back to me saying, "Oh, well, I could see, I could see the strands of like how I would approach it as an English teacher teaching this particular scripted piece that I'd left this class for cover, and it's completely different to how I'd teach it."
Yeah.
I was like, it's a really interesting point. We come from those different backgrounds. We've got kind of different lenses that we approach to the same subject. So I think I think you'd have to have a richness there, and I'd
Mm.
advocate for having, you know, trained specialist teachers in that subject. And that's kind of so National Drama, one of the alliance bodies, who do a great job at advocating for the arts and drama in particular, and making sure that drama is a right and accessible to students across the whole educational range. And one of their kind of main kind of points that they kind of advocate for is having trained specialist drama teachers teaching the subject.
This is a really interesting concept, isn't it? Because in our chat last week when we were planning the show, we had a little conversation about um, subject knowledge
Yeah.
and the difference between going through and doing your drama degree and then coming in from practice.
Mm,
But what we're kind of talking about now is a different separation of knowledge, and it's that pedagogical knowledge,
mm,
isn't it? It's that you might have a drama degree, but if you then trained as an English teacher, you may not be able to teach drama in the same way, despite having the same subject knowledge as a drama teacher who trained as a drama teacher.
Yeah, I think it goes even further than that. It's pedagogical content knowledge.
Yeah,
So it's that knowing the content of your subject, but knowing the appropriate or the most effective pedagogies that work. When I was training, we had it explained to us that it was like so the phrase that we were always kind of touted. It's using your knowledge of drama to teach the subject of drama. So your understanding of theatre,
mm,
performance, rehearsing, devising, and all the different styles, the kind of set design, theatre design as well, using all of that understanding and your knowledge of that and your practice of that to actually teach the subject to
yeah,
really bring it to life. And I kind of think it's the same of like if you're a literacy teacher, an English teacher, you are going to have much more expertise in teaching English in an Englishy kind of way.
yeah.
It's a really poor phrase, but like teaching English in an Englishy way that will be really effective in empowering for students,
Yes.
which will be completely different to another teacher approaching it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Because it is, this is something that comes up quite a lot, often early in the career, but I think it is good to revisit this idea of subject knowledge,
Mhm.
or subject skill versus pedagogical um, preferences almost. Because I'm
Mm,
thinking, I come from a drama practice background,
mm.
but I know from having covered drama that I'm an awful drama teacher because I don't have that understanding of how to teach it. I can do it. I give me a script and I can act it out, but I don't have that ability to draw those same things out of students in the same way that I can get them to conjugate verbs.
Yeah, yeah. And then that comes through practice and time and
Yeah,
guidance. But you're right, it is really, really important that actually those, people who are kind of at the front of the classroom and doing the teaching of it have that real kind of deep understanding. And I think that's where the expertise is.
yeah,
And the that's where the kind of teaching becomes like an art form within itself. It's a
yes,
science and it's an art. There is an art to it.
yeah. Absolutely. And I think quite often that is something that when we talk about expertise, when we talk about having specialists,
Mm,
is something that is quite often forgotten. Specialists tend to be touted in terms of their subject knowledge.
yeah.
Our head of chemistry is a specialist because he's a doctor of chemistry.
Mm,
But actually, it comes down to the extent to which you can teach your subject. Because subject knowledge is quite easily gained.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, and you pick it up and you go through, you get qualifications, you
Yeah,
go through, in like higher education, you're in that kind of that area where the discipline that you're learning it's set up and it's regulated and it's kind
yeah,
of practiced and there are rules that go along with it. And this is how we do chemistry. This is how we do geography in higher education. This is the discipline of it and how knowledge is created within that particular discipline. And it's the same in drama, but then when you come down into a school, you're kind of you've learnt that subject knowledge, you've got that because you've been immersed in it, but now actually you're dealing with children, and there
yeah.
there has to be a change in that knowledge. It's got to be kind of aggregated and repurposed for schools.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we do our children a disservice if we don't engage with it in that way. If we don't
Mm,
engage with the pedagogy, if we don't engage with the actual how of teaching.
yes,
Mm,
yeah, and that is it's really key. And I think with drama and kind of the arts in general, there is always going to be say like it sounds like it's a really nebulous term and it kind of is a bit vague, but there's kind of like a magic to having like a trained art teacher teach an art lesson is something they're really passionate about.
yeah, yeah,
And there is something really kind of mesmerizing and inspirational about that. So I think there is a lot of importance there in schools, I think, that do value the arts will have or will try it best in their context and their resources to have specialist trained teachers in those subjects.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so if we're coming up with a checklist for head teachers, for senior managers, for how do you show that your school values the arts beyond you put on a school play, item number one is going to be make sure that you have specialist teachers.
Well, I'd go item number one, make sure it's on the curriculum, make sure there
Okay,
is some
fair.
timetable curriculum time on there, and that it is, it's parable to art, that it's parable to music.
Hmm.
so that even within that, the system that leaders have to work under, it's not necessarily their fault that
No.
is the nature of things. They are accountable to a system higher than them with more power than them.
Yes.
So I'd say to leaders, just make sure it's, within the arts, it's equal. The curriculum time is equally shared. It's there, and that it's equally shared. That'd be the top of my checklist.
Fair. Okay. All right. So enough curriculum time, and I suppose specifically at Key Stage 3, because we're not wanting to force art subjects at Key Stages 4 and 5.
Yeah,
Um, Making sure that we've got our trained specialists in
yeah.
their subjects. What else can we do? How can we make sure that the arts are not just seen to be valued, because we don't want this to be performative, but how can we
Mm.
make sure they actually are valued?
Where possible, make sure it's resourced.
Okay.
So there is kind of, you hear a lot of people's experiences or drama teachers' experiences where they don't have a studio space,
Yes.
where actually they're teaching in a classroom where every single lesson they have to come in, and the first 8 minutes of the lesson is spent moving tables and chairs out of the way.
Yeah.
And that is a real shame, because there is and you can argue that it's unnecessary, but for a student to walk into a drama space where there's an atmosphere, the lights are on, there's music playing, there's a setup of something, there's a kind of like a hook, or
Yeah.
a moment of curiosity, and an event that happens at the beginning, that it can really spark off like a student's kind of interest and curiosity in something. And actually that just takes some resources. You can't do it without necessarily having the kind of the resources in the room and space. So
Mhm.
having that space, having a purpose drama space, even if it is a classroom that's repurposed, I've seen that happen quite
Yeah.
effectively in schools as well. So having that, I think, takes kind of advocacy and value of the arts in schools beyond just this performative. Oh yeah, look, it's there on the curriculum, but they're teaching in kind of a clinical
Yeah.
gym space, or
Yeah.
the English room that nobody uses at the end of the corridor.
Yes, and that's really important for the students as well, because if they turn up to do drama in, let's say, their history classroom, and the first thing that they have to do is help to move the tables and chairs out of the way,
Yeah.
it's going to say to them that drama is lesser, because it's going to say to them that it's not important enough to have its own space.
Mm,
It requires this manual labor before you can do it. it
mm.
it needs to have a quarter of the lesson, let's say, taken up by taking the room apart and then putting it back together again. Whereas if they can walk into the drama space and it's drama right from the beginning, right from the first second that the bell goes, they've then got it in their head that it is important, that it is equal to their maths lesson, where they do sit down and the starter is on the board and they can get straight down to it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing we haven't touched upon, which I think in the arts is really key to the lifeblood of a subject, and it's being valued and celebrated and championed, is the extracurricular,
Yes.
which is just in most cases, I think I would definitely say it is from my experience, and I believe it to be so. And I think most drama teachers would also say the same. I think most music and art teachers, dance teachers would say the same as well. Is that it is just as valuable. It's
Mm.
just as important. And although we call it extracurricular, it's the same in level of importance.
Yes. Yeah. I like my previous school was always really good. They didn't let us call anything extracurricular. We always had to call it co-curricular.
Oh, great. That's a great rephrasing.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, because it showed that it was important. And you were quite fine, because I found this in languages, that the children who chose not to take for GCSE and A level still wanted to engage in some way. They
Mm,
maybe didn't feel confident enough, or they didn't have enough option blocks to choose your subject for their qualification, but they still wanted to carry on. And that co-curricular aspect to it allowed them to do that.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. And the kind of having a really rich and a kind of vibrant extracurricular like offering, I think, is really important. I think that's really
Yeah.
key, and that takes it beyond the performative. Even though it just, and that's, I think this is the thing that kind of where leadership or SLT it kind of hits up against, is this idea that it does have an impact on the wider school. If
Yes.
you are doing a show with a cast of 80 children and you are wanting to take them off timetable, that is going to have an impact there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other subject teachers are less likely to feel put out by that impact, but out by their year 11s missing out on lessons to be in the show if the arts are an embedded fundamental part of the school culture.
Yes, yeah. If it's part of the lifeblood of the school, I totally agree.
That's yeah, and I think coming back to the extracurricular stuff, I think this is also a place where staffing does need to be a consideration
Mm,
because you don't want your only extracurricular drama activity to be school play rehearsals, but we
yeah.
also know that they take up so much time and so much energy
Mm,
that maybe you as the head of drama and somebody else, your head of music, I would imagine, would
mm.
perhaps run the rehearsals as one after school activity, but you were going to want somebody else to offer, year seven drama club or, year eight um, directors in practice or, whatever it might be, so that you're not kind of removing then that extracurricular offering just to make sure that the school show can be put on.
Yeah, and you know what? It's so much the case that drama departments are a department of one, and
Yes.
they do everything. They put so much of themselves and their time into it that it's inspiring. It's really inspiring, and I
Yeah.
don't know how to do them, how they do it. I'm very fortunate in my department. I've got two, I'm biased, worked with them for a long time. They are fabulous colleagues, and the head of music that I work with is tremendous. And we put in a lot of time, and we're doing shows, we're running other little events as well. So I think like this particular year, we've done a talent show, a Christmas concert across two departments.
Yeah.
We did our school musical. Then we've done other music evenings as well, and we're kind of gearing up for a final creative arts event. So
Amazing.
we've done a lot while also running drama clubs as well and other clubs. So there's lots that we're doing, and my colleagues are helping out and they're taking on various things. So we've got that spread there. But if you're in a department of one, and maybe you don't have a music department, maybe you don't have a
Yeah.
colleague who's able to, it can all fall on your shoulders.
Yes. Yeah. And, with all the goodwill in the world, there is no way that you can take that on, especially if you are then planning your lessons, doing your CPD.
Mm.
If you've got career aspirations to climb the ladder, you will be doing bits and bobs for that. It does just become too much.
Yeah, and that is the other thing. It's kind of, often why I think it's called extracurricular because it's on top of your normal job as a
Yes.
teacher, which is intense as it is.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, to put it, politically correctly, it is really intense, and there's
Yeah.
a lot that we do as teachers, regardless of all the others stuff that goes on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think kind of having a leadership team that really kind of understands that and gets that, and I think it is quite helpful. I've worked under a couple of different leadership teams, all who will say have been supportive of the arts in more than just a performative way. But I do think it is very valuable at having someone who comes from a performing arts subject or an arts subject on that senior leadership team to be a
Yes.
voice in the room behind the closed doors that kind of says, "Oh, actually, the impact is this. You need to understand that this won't happen unless they are allowed this." And I think there's always balance and give and take there, but having an SLT team or a leadership team who are open to those conversations, I think is worth its weight in gold. So if you do have them out there, tell them how much you appreciate them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's an interesting thought though, and it's something that's come up a little bit in my research just
Mm.
informally, is what the makeup of SLT looks like. What the how some subjects are often overrepresented on SLT.
Yeah.
And we all know that our senior leaders are as unbiased as they possibly can be.
Hmm.
They do quite often leave their own subjects behind as they step out of the classroom to take those things on. But I
Yeah.
think it's not necessarily that they will privilege their own subjects. I think it's exactly as you said, and that it's very difficult to see another subject's point of view.
Yes.
So having that kind of balance on a senior leadership team is incredibly important.
Yeah, no, totally. And I do think they do really consider like a lot in most of the SLT teams that I've worked with. They do consider things from a lot of angles. And in situations where I've requested certain things and they've said, actually, no, we can't do that, we can't facilitate that, there has always been actually a really legitimate reason
Yeah.
and that has been clearly communicated. So I think I'm very, very fortunate in my own position and my own experience has been that positive. But you do hear other people's experiences, especially on like the various drama forums and the associations, where that isn't always the case, which is a real shame. Because if we, if we bring it all back to like what is the value of the arts, and I'm speaking from the value of drama,
Yeah.
it adds so much richness to the student's experience.
Hmm.
And whether they want to go on and become the next star of the West End or film in Hollywood, which is great, and I champion any kids to go on and
Oh, absolutely.
absolutely pursue that with both arms. Or even if they just enjoy it for the moment, it
Yes.
is enriching to them. It's so enriching. And
Yeah.
I think that's where the beauty of teaching the subject is kind of opening up students' eyes to that and realizing that there's joy, there's passion there, and there is skill. There's skill and there's a depth of understanding, as well as a personal kind of their own personal relationship with the subject.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think that just for students, if we consider like the we in the do we value the arts, and we bring it to say the we is the students, I think a lot of students do. I think they do value it
Yes.
when they've got access to it, when they have their kind of eyes opened up to it.
That's the thing, isn't it? And again, we touched on this briefly last week during our pre-show chat.
Yeah.
Again, cultural capital is quite often trotted out performatively.
Yeah.
But it is amazing how few students have access to the arts, even just down to things that we might take for granted. The number of times I've taught TV units in MFL for GCSE, and the kids say to me, "I don't watch TV."
Yeah.
And so, they're not watching scripted dramas. They're not watching anything other than influencers, reacting live. Maybe they are scripting things, but it's not necessary. So they're not even as exposed to the arts as we were as teenagers, just by turning on ITV and watching Coronation Street.
Yeah, and that, I think one of my favorite things as a drama teacher actually in the classroom is that moment of like spiking a child's curiosity through showing them something that is novel or kind of very much out of their own everyday experience. I
Okay.
remember we a year 8 lesson, and kind of teaching a unit on like a blended unit on mime and
Nice.
clowning skills and the kind of the ideas around that, and showing them a snippet of a show called Slava Snow Show.
Okay.
And it's an hour and 30 minutes of pure clowning. There is a very loose narrative, but it's magical. It's absolutely magical. And it's bizarre. It's really bizarre as well. And what actually they stage in this theatrical production is mind blowing. I was really fortunate enough to go and see it one year in my very early stages of teaching.
Oh, wow.
And it blew my mind. It kind of, because it ends, spoilers, it ends with a snowstorm. It's in the title, I think there. But then there is this wonderful moment where it kind of flips and the show's ended, but they keep the theatre open for 30 minutes at the end, and you're just playing in the snow
Oh,
in the
wow.
auditorium. So there's this, it's kind of showing children that at a very young age and exposing them to being like, look, this is theatre, this is drama.
Yes.
We've talked about some of these ideas. You're about to see it in a professional production that tours the globe. Isn't that magical? Isn't that wonderful? Maybe we could create something like that. And it becomes this really nice, inspiring moment. I think that's a real magic to drama, to any art, when you open the doors to that subject. And I think all teachers have those moments and can reminisce about those moments in their own experience. But for students to have that open to them, I think is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And we need more of that in our schools, I think.
Absolutely. Sometimes I think we forget, and we did a sponsored show a couple of weeks ago on the value of trips, and we talked about this. We forget that our teenagers are still children. And even though when they're kind of showing off with each other, they want to be seen as grown up and cool, they do still have that awe and wonder, as we talk about in RS. And they do still kind of crave that magic, that theatricality.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember one of my favorite year 9 modules in French was always when I did Cirque du Soleil at the end of the year. And we would just spend ages watching Cirque du Soleil on YouTube and kind of pulling apart the costumes and the music and the acrobatics and what it was to put on a show like that. And, it never mattered what the theme of the year was. The kids were always so entranced by it because they like that performance. They're drawn into the theatricality of it.
I think that at the heart of it is potentially why maybe the arts sometimes rub up. There's a bit of a disparity between, because I think every week we've discussed here, it's some people might say that it's kind of, oh, it's all up in the air and it's all a bit airy fairy there, and but actually that's kind of key to our subjects. That's kind
Yes.
of really key to the arts, and there is a
Yeah.
space for that. And I think it's because there is this kind of a certain kind of prevalence of certain concept of knowledge within schools,
Yeah.
within our, and again, I don't think it's schools that have created this. I think it's kind of schools reacting to kind of government policy. In the there's like a type of view, there's a type of knowledge, a view of knowledge. You could kind of class it traditional or academic conception of knowledge,
Yeah.
and that is really prevailing. That's the kind of the silent dominant factor that influences schools
Yes.
in policy, in the accountability measures, in the assessment systems, and the arts rub up against that because that's not kind of how our subjects operate. That's
No.
not how we function as a subject. It's I kind of I'm thinking of Robert Eagleston, who wrote. I think he's an English lecturer
Mm.
and teacher educationist for English teachers, and he writes this paper where he kind of cites a philosopher. Kind of an unassuming, not a big name in philosophy, which she is a big name in philosophy, Mary Migdally, and she talks about the philosophy as plumbing. What
Okay.
what Robert Eagleston does is talk about the plumbing of English education, as that it sits under all of the practice, all of the values of English as a secondary school subject,
Yeah.
and under there is kind of like a philosophical framework that is subtly like influencing the subject, and talks about it in a really positive way. But what he then brings in and says that schools have this schools in England at a specific time, who knows, it might change with a new government coming,
Maybe.
yeah. And he says that essentially there is this kind of dominant view of kind of like underpinning schools at the moment of knowledge, which is works really well for the sciences. It
Yeah.
has really good kind of salience for the humanities, though it's a bit more contested. But for the arts subject, it kind of it's at loggerheads. Our subjects don't function in this way. So he kind of borrows Mary's work and kind of says, well, the plumbing of the system is kind of it's against our subjects, and actually it causes loads of problems in the actual classroom. And he talks more specifically about like the concepts of powerful knowledge and cultural literacy
Mm.
and then it kind of traces it into the classroom and says, look, the problem, the plumbing is here, but the impact is actually in the classroom, and it's
Well,
causing students to have a very warped view of the
yes.
subjects. So I think that potentially might be where, if we take the context of like the arts and declining numbers of GCSE entries and students maybe not seeing the value in it or feeling the value in it
Mm.
or wanting to take it further, I think that there's some sort of contention there. I think that potentially could be an area where we say, actually, up in schools, this is the problem we're facing.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Because it is really interesting, isn't it, what children consider to be learning.
Mm,
And, they think it's learning if they are given something that they have never seen before, and then they're given a worksheet on it, and then they walk away at the end.
yeah.
Um, the number of times I've done a revision lesson, for example, and they turn around and say to me, "Oh, but what are we learning today?" And I have to sort of say to them, "Well, you're learning how to do the past tense because you can't do it. Yes, I've
Mm,
taught it to you, but you still can't do it. So you're
mm,
still learning." And so I think, that concept of knowledge is really, really interesting. And what we mean by learning and how learning isn't actually, in the same way that acting is reacting, learning is quite often relearning, it's revisiting.
mm.
And our kids don't always see that.
Yeah, and I think every teacher, what I found out in my own doctoral research with my participants as I interviewed them,
Mm.
they when I kind of start asking about that kind of, okay, we're going to talk quite about a heady topic. It's quite a wide topic and could be considered quite a vague topic.
Yeah,
What do you think of knowledge? What do you
yeah,
understand by it? All participants have started off by saying, "Oh, I don't really know. I don't think I have much to say on it." But actually, it turns out that they do. And I think as
yes,
teachers, we might not always explicitly explain it or talk about it, but we do have quite a deeply rooted understanding of knowledge
Yes.
based on our disciplines that we've been subsumed in and
Yes.
which we've had an education in and which we have practiced in the school setting as a secondary school subject. And I think that's got a huge influence on the teaching that goes on in the classroom.
Yeah.
So I kind of see it in looking at kind of like a different concept of knowledge. If you take drama and you take like a what you might class as an academic, a very traditional view of knowledge, where the emphasis is on transmission,
Yeah.
understanding of canonical texts. Very much, the teacher are framed as the source of knowledge, and students are to learn from you.
Yes.
Well, drama teaching under that conception of knowledge might look like a study of the canon. What might be deemed as the canon, lots of Shakespeare. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but it's one type of drama. Like if as an example, like a lesson where students come in, they sit down, they read Shakespeare,
Yeah.
they discuss iambic pentameter and meter. They will get up, they will perform some of it, they'll adhere to the meter and stay at that level. Whereas a practical conception of knowledge might start, the teaching of that teacher who views knowledge as a more practice and skill. Actually, then that's going to look like an incredibly different lesson to someone who's got quite an academic version of conception of knowledge.
Yes.
And a third one is experiential, an experiential conception of knowledge. And what's the importance there is the experience that certain knowledges give students.
Mhm.
And that again, that's same content, same Shakespeare lesson, but that concept of knowledge is going to have an incredibly different look and outcome in the classroom.
Absolutely. And I understand that the answer to the question I'm about to ask is going to be different for everybody. But would you consider all three of those types of knowledge to be equally valuable in drama, or do you think that we ought to be prioritizing one conception of knowledge over another?
Yeah, do you know what? I'd be really reticent to actually say, in as
Yeah.
much as in drama education, there was a period in the development of our subject where actually we were over loggerheads over what drama should be and how we should view it, and is it drama in education or is it education in drama?
Okay.
And actually, the kind of the happy point that we seem to be at now is that it's all of them. There is a space within the subject where there is a space for understanding the kind of the texts that are considered. These are really key examples of this particular style and genre.
Yeah.
And even Aristotle, when he was writing the Poetics, was using an example of that and saying, look, this Oedipus is it is the
Yeah.
the best example of a dramatic piece of literature. This is the one. So there is a space for that. And there is, you can say that in drama there's a rich body of discrete knowledge to be learnt
Yes.
there, to understand, and the context in which art develops and its kind of interplay between the two. But then there's also a real place for the development of skills and the
Yeah.
practice and the processes of drama and the roles within that and theatre, but then also the experience that comes with it. Actually, the very personal, deeply rooted kind of social, kind of individual reaction that students have to work and their kind of views on it. So actually, I think all three sit nicely within the subject. I don't think it needs to be almost like a dichotomy or a
Yeah.
trichotomy, if you want to call it that, between, oh, this is more valid than this. Actually, I think there is a richness to the subject if we bring all of those concepts of knowledge into it.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think that is the value of the subject, isn't it? The fact that it is so broad that it doesn't matter kind of what the interests of your learners are, what their abilities are, what their skill level in actual performance is. They will still take something out of it. Even if they hate getting up and performing, they may enjoy the studying of the plays. They may enjoy the life histories of the playwrights and the directors. There is something in it for everybody. And for me, that's always been the ultimate value of them, is that it doesn't matter who you bring into that classroom. If you're teaching a broad and balanced drama curriculum, kind of as you've described with all three knowledges, then everyone's going to get something out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the same, but I do believe it's the same for any subject.
Yeah.
And I think maybe part of the question of why are we questioning, do we value the arts, is potentially that there is so much placed on them in terms of the value of the subject comes from that,
Yes.
and it's derived from this idea that everyone can get something from it. You can develop confidence, you can have a go at kind of formally expressing your own views in this particular medium. But I think surely all subjects offer that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
this is kind of where I think, like in drama educationalist terms, David Hornbrook came in and said we've got to be clear. Drama as a subject is about dramatic art. It's about theatre
Yes.
arts. It's learning those processes, and you will develop all of those wonderful skills and kind of secondary skills where I can't remember what verbiage they use for them, like teamwork, confidence, how to kind of present
Oh
yourself in
yeah,
front of
soft
people,
skills. Soft skills.
which I think is a horrible term because they
It
are.
really is.
It's not a great term for it because they're really important.
Yeah.
But I think every subject offers those, and I think what you've got to bring, what we've got to bring the value to, is that actually when we're saying the value of like drama education specifically, it's learning about the theatrical arts.
Yes.
And that's where we got to kind of stake our claim, I believe. And
Yeah.
it's not to devalue the other aspects of it, because they are there, and you can argue that maybe drama does it better than some subjects because a lot of it is about standing up and performing and kind of having control over like the range of kind of physical and vocal skills that you possess.
Yeah.
But other subjects can do that as well. So I
Yes.
think we do have to broaden the kind of the value of it, and I think it comes from that kind of actually the what's fundamental to the subject is when you engage with it, you get to bring your own interpretation to it, and learning how your interpretation mashes up with the style, with the genre, with the play text in front of you, or the theme, or the kind of the topic and stimulus that's being discussed and explored. I think
Yes.
that's where it's value, and I think that's where it really empowers students.
Yeah, and I think quite often this is something that we get wrong in the conversation, not just about the arts, to be fair, but we get it wrong in the conversation about languages as well. When people say, oh, well, what is the value? We do often tend to overgeneralize it, and we
Mm,
make everything up in the air, kind of like you said a little while ago, because we know that there are so many things that are valuable and we don't want to kind of dismiss any of them. But in
yeah,
doing so, we kind of do end up dismissing our entire subjects to some people, because if they don't want to, or if they are struggling to see that it's valuable, telling them, oh, it's good for everything doesn't help. Whereas
yeah,
if we can kind of nail something down and go, this is why it's valuable compared, no, not compared to, sitting alongside something else.
yeah.
This is its unique value. That's kind of where we start getting people on side.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, for all the art subjects, more of that, more really thinking about what it is about the specific subject that has value is really key, and being able to define it. But
Mm.
that takes time, and it's not an easy thing. And
No.
everyone has very different opinions of it, but those opinions can all be equally valued.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think something like that, I think for drama, that is, and the creative industries, that's something like a value. The reason why people are saying, oh, they should have access to it, is because of the wider creative industry and the economic
Yeah.
argument. So the National Drama this year published their position statement and position on, as I said, like drama education across the whole spectrum. How it should fit in, and what the aims, what the values for it. And quite a lot of their argument rests on this idea of actually the creative industries, and they quote that it kind of contributes 126 billion
Oh
annually to
wow.
the British economy. And I was kind of reflecting on that and thinking about it. I'm like, well, it is kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
It is everywhere. Pop into the capital, pop into London, and it's almost oversaturated with like West End shows, smaller
Yeah.
performances, like live music acts, classical music, opera, museums, art workshops. It's everywhere.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've got on my list of things to ask you about employability, and I was reticent to do so because we were having such fun kind of talking about
Mm,
the arts in the kind of ethereal, they should be enjoyed for enjoyability's sake.
yeah,
But a lot of what we talk about these days is based on employability. A lot of the decisions that our young people will make are
yeah,
based on employability. And you're right, I think quite often we don't I think quite often we are so worried about getting our children's hopes up and then ultimately having them dashed that
Mm.
we don't teach them that actually there are perfectly viable careers in the arts that they can and should pursue.
Yes, yeah, and do you know what? I'm sympathetic on the parent side because
Yes.
all the parents I've engaged with are very much like I want my kid to have a decent paying career that's going
Yeah.
to set them up for life, and that they don't have to struggle. And I do believe that parents do believe that about their children and want that for their futures. But I think the kind of the perception of a career in the creative industries is you'll never make it big, you will always struggle. And
Yes.
I always, in the background, I'm always thinking, well, okay, bit it's a bit negative.
Yeah.
Uh,
Somebody has to.
yeah, somebody has to, but also, have you ever thought that your children might just enjoy it? It
Yes.
might give their life meaning.
Yes.
It might feed a deep-seated passion with them. And
Yeah.
you know what? Call me up in the sky. It's all very heady, ethereal, kind of, it's all very optimistic. But I'm quite happy to be naively optimistic about things, and I kind of want that for the students that I teach, that they should be striving for these things that actually fulfill them and make
Yeah.
them feel, you know, valid as a human, and that they enjoy doing something. And I say to my students, your career or your jobs that you might have, working,
Yeah.
unless you make it big in the lottery, is going to last for a long time. So you might as well be doing something that you enjoy, that feeds you as a person for whatever reason. So it's totally valid to have a career in the arts, but I do think there
Absolutely.
is a bit of there's a saturation of it, not in
Yes.
terms of like saying, oh, there are too many people getting into the arts, because the declining numbers might suggest that actually that isn't the case. But I mean to say that it's so everywhere that we kind of don't register it. We just
No.
don't actually see all of these jobs and all of these roles, and every single one of them is a potential career for someone
Yeah.
if that's what they want to do. So there is this. So there's lots of arguments to celebrate and put value in them, but they just don't seem to be valued in the system.
No, that's it. Because, you think when we were talking just now about careers in the arts and who is out there, I was thinking about Rachel Ziegler and her Don't Cry for Me Argentina out on the
Yeah,
balconies in the West End. And that
yeah.
is kind of what comes to mind. But you don't think about when you go down the pub and there's a live band playing. That's a career in the arts.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And but it's everywhere, and we've come to expect it. And it's
Yeah.
lovely if you go down the pub and there is a live band going. It might not be the kind of music you enjoy, but it's
No.
nice that it's there.
Yes.
And it's everywhere. So I don't think it's considered, the kind of perception is that it might not be
No.
considered as a valid career path, but it totally is. And there are
Yeah.
so many careers out there in the arts,
Yeah.
so many. But I think
Yeah.
there's something to be said there, and I think that's always a strong argument that you can kind of whip out and say, look, actually, there is loads of different ways you can get involved, and it does lead somewhere, and actually, you might really enjoy that career,
Yeah. I
and
know
it is
somebody.
viable.
Absolutely. I know someone who is a former actress, but is now an accountant, but
Mm,
she works in TV accounts.
right.
So, she's still involved in the arts world. She still gets to be around the creatives, which is what she liked about it. She still gets to be with that energy, but she's doing something that well, to be fair, it's not very stable, because as soon as whatever TV show she's working on ends, she's out of
Mm,
work. It's just as unstable as being an actress was. But
mm,
it does pay better, to be fair. Um, but there are, for young people who maybe feel stuck between a rock and a hard place, between pursuing an arts based career and making their parents happy by getting something that is stable, there are kind of, in inverted commas, office jobs which
mhm.
are in the arts.
Absolutely. And I think that's still like having a kind of, you're still in the creative industries, you're still supporting it, still working in it. And it is, it's just not thought about enough, I guess.
No.
But schools do have a lot of pressure placed on them to talk about the careers.
Yes.
So it is,
Yeah.
I believe it will start to filter through.
Yeah. I think so. I hope so. I hope so, because I think, as friends of the show will know, I'm currently on an anti-AI crusade. Um,
Right.
but kind of, as one of the big criticisms that people in the arts community, particularly artists,
Mm,
fine artists, have, is that AI is churning out art. Whether or not we will consider what LLM creates as art as a whole of a show, but it's
Yeah.
turning out pictures. And you've got people saying, well, this is taking jobs away from an artist. So it's clear that artistic jobs are valuable because we've created whole large language model AIs to try and get around paying them for it.
Yeah, which is a horrible thought.
It really is. It really is. Oh, I cannot believe that we are almost out of time. This has been such a good chat, Luke. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you for having me. Thanks for the opportunity.
Just before we do wrap up, was there anything else that you wanted to kind of get across? Any message that you have? You sat there and thought, oh, damn, Darren hasn't asked me about something, and I really wanted to talk about it.
No, do you know what? I genuinely think we've covered loads. I think actually, do we value the arts? To
Yeah,
sum up, I think teachers do, whether you teach arts or not. I think they generally do, and I believe schools as institutions do. I think
yeah.
the education system that we currently labour under at this point in time potentially
Hmm.
doesn't, or
Okay,
the policies or practices in place don't,
that's fair.
or don't see the value in it. But I
Yeah,
think as a
that's fair.
society, as in a culture, I think we absolutely do. So I think
Yes,
there's a bit of a mismatch and a disparity between kind of the education system and kind of what's going on actually in society and teachers at the other end of that system. I genuinely
yeah,
think we all value the arts and we can all see the value in it. And I think parents included also see the value in it. But the system is created in such a way that it is devalued, which is a real
yes,
shame. And
yeah.
it falls to drama teachers and all art teachers out there to keep, banging on about it.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I think, as sad as it sounds, this is what it boils down to: is the fact that the interest is there, the desire is there. We just don't always realise that we're interested in the arts.
Mm.
The film buffs might not consider their interest to be in the art, but it absolutely is.
Yeah.
The year 12 Spanish class that I knew who became addicted to Mexican telenovelas, they were interested in the arts. They just didn't realize that soap operas are art.
Yeah.
It's all so it's about raising awareness and managing that disconnect, isn't it? Creating that cognitive connection between what is art and the fact that when we say art, it's not always the highbrow. It is often the highbrow stuff, but it's not
Mm.
always.
No, of
And
course. It's much broader than that, and it's much more all-encompassing, which I think
yes,
is, actually a strength of it.
yeah, absolutely. Shakespeare was designed for the people. He was designed to be seen by normal people who just wanted to have a good time on a Saturday afternoon.
Mm,
And the more we remember that, the better.
absolutely.
Oh, well, thank you so much again for giving up your Saturday morning to be here. It's been a great conversation. I would love to have you back on maybe in a year or two when you are done with your research to hear what you found out, to hear what you've
Yeah,
uncovered.
absolutely.
Um, Best of luck with it. I know you're ahead of me, so I know that I've still got to come what you've already done, and I know what you've got coming up, and the hard work that you're about to put in. So I will keep my fingers crossed that it all goes smoothly.
Oh, thank you. I do appreciate that. And good luck with your studies as well.
Well, thank you very much, and a big thank you to all of our listeners who have tuned in today. I hope that you have taken as many things away from what Lucas had says I have. I've got a whole page, I've got pages of notes right here of things that I want to follow up on over the weekend and over the coming weeks. And I hope that you all have taken something out of it too. I wish everybody on the show and who has been listening a great weekend. I will see you next Saturday morning. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
Take care.
Over 7,500 primary schools are already using Capel Primary to boost confidence in teaching foundation subjects. Our expert-created curriculum planning, lessons and CPD are here to support and upskill you, whether you're a subject lead or classroom teacher. If you've got knowledge gaps in art, music, computing or beyond, we've got you covered. Head to capelprimary.com and empower your teaching today.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads. No distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.